Today on Legally Us, Anne Heche's estate is sued by the woman whose home was destroyed in the crash. Plus, Alec Baldwin is suing Rust crew members in order to clear his name, as it is revealed Aaron Carter died without a will. We've got that plus so much more on today's Legally Us. Hey everyone, welcome to Legally Us. I'm Christina. That's of course Neama Rahmani, president of West Coast Trial Lawyers and former federal prosecutor. Hi Neama, how are you?
Hi Christina, how's it going?
Good. Lots to get to this week as always, but let's kick it off with Anne Heche. So the woman whose home caught on fire during the fatal car crash has sued the late actress's estate for $2 million. So in a lawsuit that was filed on November 9th, Lynn Michelle claimed that she and her pets almost lost their lives in the August 5th crash that of course led to Anne's death. So in court documents obtained by Page 6, she alleged that Anne's car barreled through the front of her house and deep into its interior before coming to a halt just feet away from her, her two dogs, and her tortoise. She added that the accident left her completely traumatized, unusually startled by hearing loud noises, plagued by nightmares and flashbacks of the incident, terrified of walking outside, and atop that, without a place to live. She also claimed that the fire caused by the crash destroyed an entire life's worth of her personal possessions. So 1 month after her death, her son Homer was granted control of his late mother's estate. We talked about this a couple months ago. And since then, her loved ones have been locked in a legal battle over the estate, with her ex claiming that Homer and his mother were estranged at the time of the death. In October, court denied his request to become the guardian of her other son, Atlas's portion of the estate, until he turns 18. So a lot to unpack here. So since this woman is suing the estate, will Anne Heche's son have to deal with this now?
Anne Heche's son will have to deal with it as the personal representative of the estate. So there's good and there's bad when you're the representative or you're the living heir. You're going to get the assets, but you also have to deal with the liabilities. And because Anne Heche caused this property damage and maybe emotional distress, we'll talk about that in a minute, the estate is going to have to take care of that because that's a liability of the estate. So whoever's the representative of the estate, which it's going to be Homer here, is going to have to deal with both the good and the bad.
Right. And clearly, like you said, there was a lot of damage to this home. It was, engulfed in flames. Like she said, a life's worth of possessions were destroyed. But then you have the emotional distress of this. So how can you prove that? How can you prove that she is going through something like that?
Yeah, Christina, and plaintiffs can ask for all types of things, and the property damage makes sense. But to tack on this much emotional distress because your home was destroyed without any bodily injury or harm to your pets seems a bit too far. I don't think a jury is going to pay here in Los Angeles, where I live, and I'm a former federal prosecutor, but I do civil plaintiffs work and I handle these types of cases. You usually don't get a big emotional distress award when you're dealing with a strictly property damage claim.
Got it. So out of the $2 million that she is asking for, I know that's guessing, but where do you think she'll kind of fall into this? Because I'm sure she will get some money from this due to the home damage, things like that. But then does it go under insurance? Where does it where does she get the money from this?
Yeah, so insurance is one of the assets of the estates, whatever coverage Anne Heche had. So there's coverage for property damage and there's separate coverage for bodily injury. So whatever the property damage is, I believe Lynn Michelle is going to get that paid for. Damage to her home, her personal possessions, whatever the value of that was at the time of the accident. But for her to get emotional distress, I don't think an insurance company is going to pay for it. If she pushes the case to trial, I don't think a jury is going to give it in a case like this. Again, not your typical emotional distress claim. You need some sort of injury to yourself for jurors to award that kind of damage.
Right. Does it get messy when people sue estates? Because obviously you can't sue the person because unfortunately she's no longer here. But does it get messy when you sue estates?
Oh, it does. And, we're dealing with a case right now involving Takeoff, who passed away. So whenever there is someone who passes away and you're in litigation with that person, what will happen is either the plaintiff, the person suing, has to open the estate on behalf of the decedent if an estate isn't already open, or they have to substitute the estate that's already been open. And we know Homer and Alex have been going back and forth on this as a defendant for the former living person, who of course would be Anne Heche. So it can get messy because sometimes you have other parties, non-family members, who are opening estates on behalf of a decedent to get that decedent substituted in. in a pending case.
Right. Let's kind of jump around a little bit and kind of jump off of that because Aaron Carter recently passed away and his estate will reportedly be left in the hands of the state of California because TMZ reported that he did not leave behind a will. So sources told TMZ that Aaron was advised by his lawyers, of course, to draw something up, but following the birth of his son, but he never did. So in this case, who controls the estate now? Is it still the state of California?
And so we talked about estates, and when you die without a will, you die intestate. It's actually a legal word, a Latin term. So if you die without a will, then things progress generally under a succession plan. So what will happen is the minor child will be the next of kin because he wasn't married, and I know he had a fiance, but a fiance does not have the same rights that a spouse or a domestic partner does. So everything will go to the minor child because Aaron Carter passed without a will, and his lawyers were giving him good advice. When you have a child, it's very important to have a will, some sort of estate plan, because not only do you have the assets and liabilities that we've been talking about, but you need to make important decisions as to who is going to be the guardian of your child. What are your wishes? And if you don't have that, then you have potential guardianship issues when you have relatives maybe fighting over who's going to care for a minor child.
Right. Well, and especially in this case, because the child, I believe, was living with his former fiance's grandparents as well. So they were, having some custody issues as well because he was going through some troubling times. So, but also this child is not even a year old. So does this go into a trust for him until he's old enough? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So there's going to be a guardian that's going to have to be appointed especially if there's any dispute over who's going to take care of this young child. And, those assets will be inherited by the child. So whoever is responsible for caring for this child is also going to have to care for the finances. So, there's so much going on here because obviously you have Carter's assets, you have his liabilities, you have guardianship issues. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. And I can see some fighting, especially if there was some potential custody issues while he was alive. They may even get worse now that he's passed.
Right. And especially even because he has other siblings too, and they might get involved as well. Could you foresee that getting messy with his ex-fiance as well?
Oh, certainly. You're going to have a situation where you're going to have folks who are saying that it's in the best interest of the child for the child to live with me, for me to manage those assets. And I can imagine that there's going to be litigation on this issue, and a judge is going to have to get involved and decide where this child lives the rest of his life. It's going to be about 17 years or so. So this is a very important decision that a court's likely going to have to make.
Yeah, so sad. All right, well, let's move on to Alec Baldwin because he sued the armorer and multiple crew members from Rust for negligence after they handed him a loaded gun on set, resulting in the death of the film's cinematographer, Helena Hutchins. So the actor went after 4 crew members, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, Dave Halls, Sarah Zachary, and Zeth Kenny, for failing to maintain safety on set. So the lawsuit states Gutierrez Reed failed to check the bullets or the gun carefully. Halls failed to check the gun carefully and yet announced the gun was safe before handing it to Baldwin. And Zachary failed to disclose that Gutierrez Reed had been acting recklessly offset and was a safety risk to those around her. So Baldwin's lawyer said the actor seeks to clear his name and hold the defendants accountable for the misconduct. Of course, this accident occurred when he was practicing for a scene in the Western film when the gun, which he thought was cold, went off. So do you think that Alec will be able to clear his name in this case? Why do you think he is going after these crew members now?
And Christian, there's so much going on here. So I just kind of take a step back. So we know that Baldwin already settled the civil lawsuit with respect to Helena Hutchins' family, Matt Hutchins, the decedent. But obviously you have other individuals there as well, and they've filed lawsuits. So now that they've filed against Alec Baldwin, they've done so because he is the deep pocket. He's the one with the ability to pay. So under tort law there in New Mexico, so negligence law, anyone can be 0% at fault for an accident or an injury to 100% or anything in between. So what Baldwin is trying to do is put as much of the blame on other people. Of course, the plaintiffs want to put as much of the blame as they can on him because the greater judgment they have and the greater percentage, the more they'll be able to get out of Baldwin. An example I like to give is Let's say it's a $1 million case. If Baldwin is 50% responsible, he'll have to pay $500,000. If he's 10% responsible, he'll have to pay, $100,000. So he wants to get that percentage down as much as possible because New Mexico is what we call a several liability state. The damages are apportioned according to fault. So even though the original plaintiff didn't want to bring all these other actors in, Baldwin does to shift as much of the blame as possible on these other responsible parties, like the armorer, the assistant director. I don't think Baldwin would have sued these other folks, unless he had been already sued himself, which is what happened.
Got it. So he's not seeking money in this. He's just kind of passing the blame a little bit, right?
Exactly. Shifting the blame. This is what we call indemnification or contribution. So he's gotten sued directly and he's bringing these other defendants in under a cross complaint. So dragging them in to kind of shift the blame to them.
Right. Do you think if this was anybody else, he would have maybe faced jail time in this situation?
It's a hard case. And I think that the more time that goes by with the New Mexico district attorney not filing charges, it really benefits Baldwin because generally speaking, if you're a prosecutor, the more time that goes by, witness memories fade, evidence disappears. And now we're talking about more than 1 year. I think the challenge in prosecuting this case, you're never going to get an intentional murder or homicide case. I think the best case scenario would be an involuntary manslaughter case, which would be based on criminal negligence or recklessness. But the problem is you have someone who's an armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed. Her job is to maintain these weapons, to inspect them. You have Dave Halls, the assistant director, who reportedly told Baldwin that this was a cold gun. And I think Baldwin has a good argument that he can reasonably rely on this representation. So I think those are good defenses there. Now, if you're prosecuting this case, you really want to point to a few facts that sort of go in your favor. You would argue that even if you believe it's a cold gun, you should never point a weapon at another human being. And I know Baldwin said that the gun misfired, but I think the argument would be, well, you never should have your finger near the trigger, or you shouldn't cock the hammer. These are things that Baldwin admitted to when he gave that ABC interview. So I think you have some ways to potentially get to negligence, but the more time that passes, I think it's less likely that Baldwin is going to be charged in this case.
Definitely. So what do you think the best outcome in this case will be?
I think the best outcome for the victims in this case, the plaintiffs, is to put as much of the blame as possible. Again, Gutierrez-Reed, I don't know her finances, but my understanding is that she's young. This is maybe the second or third time she had a gig like this as an armorer on a movie. So I don't think she's going to have the ability to pay any type of big settlement or verdict. So if you want to go after someone that can fit, that's going to be Alec Baldwin and not the other folks.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, Neama, thank you so much for running down all things legal with us as always.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks for having me, and I'll see you real soon.
All right. See you soon. For more news, content, and exclusive interviews, make sure to hit the sub, like, and bell button down below and visit usmagazine.com.